almost wasn't a good morning. Woke up today. Yeah, and I was out of coffee. And I didn't realize it yesterday, but used up the last of the coffee yesterday. Woke up this morning, no coffee for Uncle Lou. Yeah, I had to run up to the gas station there. Get my morning Johan, my morning Joe, whatever. Yep. But on today's edition of Coffee Talk with Uncle Lou, this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I've put it off and put it off and put it off, trying to wait as long as I could here. I'm gonna go ahead and do it though. But the curious case of Demetris Robertson. Now, if you're a UGA fan, of course you know who Demetris Robertson is already, or chances are that you do. If you're not, he's a high school senior. He's a wide receiver. He's the #1 rated high school wide receiver product in the nation for this year's class, 2016, and he hasn't signed yet. He's the only remaining 5-star that hasn't signed yet. Of course, signing day was February 3rd. So you had a bunch of early enrollees that signed in January. Then you had the rest of the guys pretty much signed on February 3rd. D-Rob has been holding out. We're going to talk about the reasons why. But he is set to make his decision, his announcement now on May 2nd. So a week or so away. So the drama's coming to an end here, and we'll know soon where D-Rob is going. It's down to just a handful of schools. Most of the experts say it's going to be UGA, Notre Dame, Cal, or Georgia Tech. I personally believe it will be UGA. I have no way of knowing that. It's just a gut feeling. Basically, what has happened with this guy is complicated. There's a lot of different issues in play with D-Rob here, and depending on who you listen to and who you believe, it could be any number of things. I've heard you have sort of the standard story that's been floating around for several months now, which goes something like this. He wants to go to Stanford. Stanford wants him. Everyone wants him. He's the #1 wide receiver in America. Everyone wants him. He wants to go to Stanford. Well, most of you guys know it is extremely difficult to get into Stanford. Most major colleges, or most colleges with major Division I programs, your Power 5 schools, have two sets of entry requirements for students. They have entry requirements for your regular students, then they have entry requirements for athletes. And it's no secret that the requirements are lower for athletes. The NCAA sets a minimum standard that you have to meet in order to qualify to attend, enroll, and play sports at any of its member institutions, any university or college in America. Minimum requirement. Well, Stanford does not adhere to those minimum requirements. Stanford has its own set of requirements that are much higher than the NCAA minimums. So the word for a long time has been that D-Rob really wants to go to Stanford, but his SAT score was not quite high enough to meet Stanford's minimum requirements. So we've all heard the stories over the last couple of months of him retaking and retaking the SAT, trying to increase that score to meet Stanford's requirements, with the thought process being that if he could meet that score, that would be where he actually ended up going. So that's sort of the story with Stanford there. The other schools that he has primarily showed interest in: Alabama, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, and Cal. Cal sort of came on a little late in the process. It was a little bit of a surprise when Cal started showing up on his list of finalists. Most people thought it was basically a four-way battle between Georgia, Georgia Tech, Alabama, and Notre Dame. Cal sort of came in late. The word is that Alabama has been moved off of his list, and that Alabama is no longer being considered as a landing spot for D-Rob. The two schools you hear the most are Georgia and Notre Dame. Georgia Tech still holding out hope to get him, although it would be a little bit strange for him to enroll there given the fact that he's a wide receiver, and Georgia Tech, of course, runs the triple option. But Georgia Tech has stole a couple of really good receivers in the past. I mean, as much as I hate Georgia Tech and love to rag on what they do there, Calvin Johnson and Demaryius Thomas came from there. Calvin Johnson, I believe, was recruited before they swapped to the triple option, so maybe that's not a great example. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. It wouldn't be completely unheard of for him to go there. They would probably let him play running back, is what I'm hearing, if he went there, and of course wide receiver. But I don't expect him to go to Georgia Tech. I think it's going to be Georgia or Notre Dame, and I think it'll be Georgia. I've heard all sorts of things about D-Rob and why the decision has taken so long. If you don't believe the Stanford story, which is sort of the official story, that he just hasn't enrolled anywhere because he's retaking his SATs numerous times to get into Stanford. If you don't believe that story, there are other stories floating around. His sister is a track star and is going to enroll at Georgia. So you have stories floating around that he wants to be on campus with his sister, which would seem to give Georgia an advantage there. I've even heard that retaking his SATs is not an attempt to get into Stanford, but in reality, he couldn't even meet the minimum requirements for the NCAA to get accepted in any school, and so he was retaking his SATs just to try to meet the minimum requirements. There are people out there saying that. I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true. It seems to me that it would make him look awfully foolish with all this Stanford talk, if he wasn't even qualified to enroll in Georgia or Georgia Tech or any other school, if he couldn't even meet the minimum NCAA requirements, and he was spinning this story about trying to improve his score 100 points so he could qualify for Stanford, that would really make him look foolish. So I tend not to believe that story, but again, that is one of the stories that's floating around out there, if you choose to believe it. A lot of UGA fans in particular, and probably fans of these other schools too. I just don't interact with fans of the other schools like I do with UGA fans, but a lot of UGA fans are getting a little bit frustrated and a little bit fed up with the whole process and the way it sort of played out with D-Rob. You got people calling him a drama queen, an attention whore, all these sorts of things. I can understand people being frustrated with the way this situation has been handled. I totally get that. There's nothing wrong with that. If being frustrated, it has taken him a long time. He's gone back and forth from school to school. He had several visits a few months back scheduled at UGA, and he kept canceling them, for basketball tournaments or different things like that. But, he did end up making several trips to UGA. But where I sort of draw the line, or where I sort of have a problem with some of the Georgia fans, is when they let their frustration with the way the process is playing out cloud their judgment, really. I see comments every day from UGA fans. I see it on my YouTube channel. I see them on Twitter. I see them in different places on Facebook of UGA fans making comments that go basically like this: we don't need him. We don't want him. You're either all dog or you're no dog. If you really wanted to go to UGA, you would have enrolled in February. We want people who want to be here. We don't want to be anybody's second choice. We don't need him. That sort of thing. I couldn't disagree more with that line of thinking. The wide receiver position at Georgia has not exactly been a position that's been jumping off the screen lately. I mean, let's just be realistic about the situation. I'm not here to bash any one particular player or anything like that in this video, but it's been a while since Georgia's had a legitimate threat at wide receiver one. It's just reality. Now, I get it. Our quarterback play has been below average the last couple of years, and that's going to hurt your receiving numbers. I completely understand that. And that just is what it is. But you look up and down the roster at UGA, and yes, we have some talented freshmen coming in this year, and even a JUCO guy. But none of those people were ever rated as the number one wide receiver in America coming out of high school. There's a reason he has that ranking. There's a reason all these other teams wanted him. Ask yourself this, Georgia fan. whose wide receivers right now or last year or whatever you want to look at are better, Alabama or Georgia? Of course, you'd say Alabama. I mean, the Ridley kid at Alabama is a star. There's no doubt about it. And overall, their wide receiver core is better than UGA's. And they wanted him, okay? So, of course UGA wants him. Whoever ends up with him, it's going to be worth the wait, period. We've got Terry Godwin. He had a great year last year. He's got great hands. He's a good route runner. He can play in the Wildcat. He's great in space and things like that. But he's, what is he, 5'11", something like that. Anyway, we need D-Rob. So slow down on the, we don't need him type talk, things like that. The wait will be over soon. Keep in mind whether this guy committed on signing day back on February 3rd or whether he waits another month even to commit. The guy can't practice till June anyway. He's in high school, okay? He's not an early enrollee. He's not like Jacob Eason or Isaac Nott or any of these other guys that enrolled in January and can already practice with the team. He can't do anything with the team until June anyway. So whatever team gets him is going to be lucky to have him, and I certainly hope it's UGA. But anyway, I got to get out of here. I've wasted just about enough of your time. But have a great day if you can, and an even better morning too. Good morning.
Stop trolling me! Ah!